The hunt begins. Sena ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she did not stop. She couldn't. The creatures behind her, the Gurnak hunters, were getting closer. Their heavy footsteps crashed through the jungle, shaking the ground like an earthquake. She knew what they wanted. They wanted her. The air smelled of burnt flesh, and Sena swallowed back her fear. She had seen what the Gurnak did to their prey. She had seen the fires. The screams of the captured still echoed in her mind. The Gurnak did not kill for survival. They killed for pleasure. Sena gasped, stumbling over a fallen tree. Her thin, scaled arms scraped against the rough bark as she barely caught herself. Her body was not built for speed. She was a thinker, a learner, not a warrior. But here, on this dark and deadly planet, only warriors survived. Behind her, the deep voice of Vorgar, the Gurnak leader, boomed through the trees. "Run, little one. Run while you can. It only makes the hunt more fun." Sena's breath hitched. She could hear their laughter, cruel and sharp like blades. Up ahead, the jungle thinned, revealing a clearing. But she did not feel relief. The moment she stepped into the open, she would be fully exposed. The Gurnak had hunting rifles, weapons that fired burning plasma. If they saw her, she would not escape. Still, she had no choice. Her lungs burned, and her legs trembled. If she slowed down, if she hesitated, she would die. Taking a deep breath, she sprinted forward, breaking through the last of the trees. For a moment, the silence of the open clearing surrounded her. The twin moons of this planet shone down, casting silver light on the scene. And then the gunfire began. Bright plasma shots sizzled through the air, striking the ground near her feet. The heat of one blast singed the edge of her long cloak. She threw it off, feeling the fabric turn to ash behind her. A sharp pain exploded in her side as something grazed her, not a direct hit, but enough to burn through her light armor. She cried out but did not stop running. She had almost made it to the other side of the clearing when a massive shadow blocked her path. Vorgar, the Gurnak leader, was over 7 feet tall, his thick, armored skin covered in dark tribal markings. His red eyes gleamed with hunger, and his sharp tusks curved upward in a wicked smile. In one hand, he held a massive hunting blade, still stained with the blood of his last kill. Nowhere left to run, little prey. Sena's chest tightened. She backed away, her mind racing. She had no weapons. She had no strength. The jungle was behind her, but the other Gurnak were there, laughing as they closed in. Was this the end? Her people were intelligent, skilled in science and diplomacy. They believed in peace. But peace did not exist in the wild. Here, in this cruel and violent world, strength ruled. Vorgar raised his blade, his grin widening. And then the first shot rang out. A loud, powerful blast echoed through the clearing, followed by a wet, sickening thud. One of the Gurnak collapsed to the ground. A smoking hole burned straight through his chest. The laughter stopped. Sena's breath caught. That shot, it was not Gurnak technology. It was not one of their crude plasma rifles. This shot was different, precise, deadly. The Gurnak turned, their weapons raised, scanning the trees. Another shot. Another Gurnak fell. Now, the hunters were afraid. They were not used to being hunted. Vorgar's face twisted in fury. "Who dares?" he roared. Silence answered him. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the wind rustling the leaves and the dying gurgles of the fallen Gurnak. Then, a shadow moved in the trees. Slowly, a figure stepped forward, emerging from the darkness. He was tall, his stance calm and controlled. His armor was sleek, advanced, and covered in scratches from past battles. In his hands, he held a rifle that glowed faintly blue, unlike anything Sena had ever seen. A human. His eyes were steady, sharp like a predator. He showed no fear, no hesitation. He stood alone against a dozen Gurnak, And yet, he looked as if he had already won. He met Vorgar's gaze and, in a low, steady voice, said just 3 words. "She's not yours." Sena had never heard a human speak before, but in that moment, as she stood in the shadow of death, she felt something she had never felt before. Hope. The mysterious human rescuer. The jungle fell into an eerie silence. The Gurnak shifted uneasily, their sharp claws tightening around their weapons. Sena's breath was shallow, her body frozen in shock. A human. She had heard stories, tales whispered among the scholars of her people. Humans were primitive, aggressive, dangerous. A young species that fought too many wars, too many battles. But as she watched this one, standing tall, facing the Gurnak without fear, she realized something else. They were lethal. Vorgar growled, his red eyes locked onto the human. "You dare interfere, human." The man didn't respond. He simply adjusted his grip on the rifle, his finger hovering near the trigger. His stance was loose, confident, as if he had been in hundreds of battles before. One of the Gurnak, eager to impress his leader, charged forward with a roar. The human moved. It was fast, too fast. Sena barely saw him raise his rifle before the shot cracked through the air, a perfect headshot. The Gurnak dropped before he could even reach him. The remaining hunters hesitated. This was not how things were supposed to go. They were the predators. They were the ones who hunted, who decided who lived and who died. And yet, in just a few seconds, they had lost 3 of their own. The human took 1 step forward. Sena could hear the quiet confidence in his voice as he spoke. "Last chance. Walk away." The Gurnak were strong, but they were not stupid. Their numbers were shrinking, and now, with the human here, the hunt had changed. But Vorgar was different. He was the leader, and he would never back down in front of prey. His lips curled into a snarl, revealing razor-sharp teeth. "I do not fear you, human." The man tilted his head slightly. "Then you're an idiot." And then, all hell broke loose. The battle begins. Vorgar lunged forward, his massive blade swinging in a deadly arc. Sena gasped, her body tensing as she watched the human react. He didn't step back. Instead, he ducked low, the blade slicing just inches above his head. With a swift motion, he slammed the butt of his rifle into Vorgar's stomach. The Gurnak leader stumbled, snarling in rage. 2 more Gurnak rushed forward. The human spun, his sidearm already drawn. He fired twice. 2 perfect shots. Both hunters dropped to the ground, lifeless. Sena's mind reeled. How was this possible? The human was outnumbered. The Gurnak were bigger, stronger, but he moved with deadly precision, wasting no motion, his every strike calculated. Vorgar roared in fury, charging again. This time, he was faster, swinging with brute force. The human barely dodged, rolling to the side as the blade slammed into the dirt. He needed a new strategy. He couldn't just shoot his way out of this. Then he saw it. To the right, the ground was unstable, a deep, hidden pit covered by jungle debris. If he could lure Vorgar there. The human took a step back, lowering his weapon slightly. A bait. Vorgar grinned. He thought the human was tiring. He took the bait. He lunged forward, aiming to crush the smaller warrior. But just before he made contact, the human sidestepped. Too late, Vorgar realized his mistake. The ground beneath him collapsed, sending him plunging into the pit. The impact was brutal, and a loud snap echoed through the trees. Vorgar let out a painful howl, but he was alive. Barely. The remaining Gurnak hesitated, their leader now wounded, trapped. Their fight was gone. They turned and ran, disappearing into the jungle. Silence returned. Sena still couldn't believe it. She was alive. And it was because of this human. The aftermath. The human approached her, scanning her for injuries. "Can you walk?" he asked. His voice was steady, calm, like the battle had meant nothing to him. Sena forced herself to her feet, nodding. She was still shaken, but she refused to show weakness. "You saved me." The man sighed, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Yeah, guess I did." She studied him, curiosity growing in her mind. "Who are you?" He hesitated. Then, after a moment, he simply said, "Ryan Carter, Captain, Terran Expeditionary Forces." She had never heard of his unit, but she knew one thing for certain. This human was not like the stories. He was something else, and whatever he was, she owed him her life. The escape and the chase. Sena's legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand straight. The battle was over, but she knew the danger hadn't passed. The Gurnak never gave up so easily. The human, Ryan Carter, was already moving. He pulled a small device from his belt and pressed a button. A holographic map flickered to life, showing the dense jungle terrain around them. "We need to move now," he said without looking at her. Sena hesitated. "They ran. They're gone." Ryan shook his head. "No, they're regrouping." His voice was calm, but there was an edge of certainty in it. He had seen this before, hunted before. A sudden, deep howl echoed from the jungle. A signal. Ryan's jaw tightened. "See, told you." Sena felt a shiver run through her spine. She knew what that sound meant. The Gurnak were calling for reinforcements. Ryan turned to her, scanning her up and down. "You're injured." Sena touched her side, wincing as she felt the raw, burned skin from the plasma shot earlier. She had ignored it during the fight, but now the pain was creeping back. Ryan sighed and pulled a small metal canister from his belt. "Hold still." Before she could argue, he pressed the canister against her wound. A hiss of cold mist erupted as a gel-like substance spread over the burn. The pain dulled almost immediately. Sena gasped. "What is this?" Ryan clipped the canister back onto his belt. "Human medical tech. It'll keep you from slowing down." Sena frowned at his words. "I won't slow you down." Ryan gave a small smirk. "We'll see." Then he turned and started moving through the jungle. Sena gritted her teeth and followed. The jungle hunt. The jungle was thick and unforgiving. Vines hung low, and massive trees towered above them, their twisted branches blocking the light from the twin moons. Strange creatures moved in the shadows, their glowing eyes watching the two escapees. Ryan moved like a trained predator, silent, efficient. He barely made a sound as he stepped over roots and through thick foliage. Sena tried to copy his movements, but her body was not built for stealth. Behind them, the distant howls of the Gurnak grew louder. They were being followed. Ryan tapped a small device on his wrist. "Echo, give me a scan." A soft beep sounded from his wrist as a tiny drone detached from his armor, flying into the trees above. A few seconds later, its robotic voice whispered in his ear. 4 Gurnak closing in from the east. 2 more coming from the ridge. Estimated time to contact: 5 minutes. Ryan cursed under his breath. Sena's breath quickened. "They're cutting us off." Ryan glanced at her. "Yeah, that's the problem with being the prey." Sena's scales rippled with frustration. "I'm not prey." Ryan gave her a sharp look. "Then prove it. Keep moving." She swallowed her pride and focused on running. They moved fast, weaving through the trees. The sounds of the Gurnak grew closer, the hunters moving with brutal speed. Then, Ryan stopped suddenly. Sena nearly crashed into him. What is it?" Ryan pointed ahead. "Cliffside." Sena followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. A sheer rock wall loomed in front of them, cutting off their path. Below, a raging river carved through jagged rocks. Jumping meant death. Sena's heart pounded. "We're trapped." Ryan, however, was calm. "No, we're not." He turned, pulling a small black device from his pack. With a flick of his wrist, it expanded into a compact grappling hook launcher. Sena's eyes widened. "Humans have strange weapons." Ryan smirked. "You haven't seen half of them." He fired the grappling hook upward. It latched onto the top of the cliff with a sharp metallic clank. He turned to Sena. "Hold on." She blinked. "Hold on, To." Before she could finish, Ryan grabbed her by the waist and pulled them both up, the grappling line reeling them into the air at high speed. Sena screamed, gripping his armor tightly as they shot toward the top of the cliff. The wind rushed past her, and for a brief moment, she felt like she was flying. Then, they landed. Ryan quickly unhooked the grapple and pulled her to her feet. Below, the Gurnek burst into the clearing. They skidded to a stop, snarling in frustration as they saw their prey had escaped. One of them, a massive brute, raised his plasma rifle and took aim. Ryan saw it and acted instantly. He shoved Sena down and fired 3 quick shots. The first 2 struck the Gurnek in the chest, sending him tumbling back. The third hit the plasma rifle, causing it to explode in a bright fireball. The remaining Gurnek hissed in anger, but did not climb after them. The cliff was too steep. For now, they were safe. Sena's breathing was ragged as she looked at the human beside her. This man was unlike any warrior she had ever seen. Ryan took a deep breath, looking at the jungle beyond the cliff. Then he turned to her. "Come on, we're not done yet." Sena nodded, realizing something strange. For the first time in her life, she felt safer with a human than with her own people. The standoff and human bravery. Sena's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths as she followed Ryan deeper into the jungle beyond the cliff. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and every step felt heavier under the weight of what had just happened. They had escaped for now, but the Gurnek wouldn't stop hunting them. Ryan moved ahead, his weapon ready, scanning the dark surroundings with trained eyes. Sena watched him carefully. This human was different. He didn't move like prey. He didn't act like someone running for survival. He acted like a hunter. She swallowed her doubt and whispered, "Where are we going?" Ryan didn't look back. Somewhere defensible. Sena's heart skipped. Defensible. Was he planning to fight? Before she could ask more, Ryan raised a hand in warning. Silence. Sena froze, her pulse thudding in her ears. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees. Then another. Ryan cursed under his breath. "They cut us off." Sena's blood turned cold as she realized what had happened. The Gurnek hadn't been chasing them blindly. They had been hurting them, pushing them toward a dead end. Ryan's jaw tightened as he scanned the trees. "They're smarter than I gave them credit for." A rustling sound. Movement in the shadows. And then, Vorgar stepped into view. The Gurnek leader's massive form emerged from the undergrowth, bloody but alive. His armor was cracked from the earlier fall, but his eyes burned with rage. Behind him, at least 6 more Gurnek appeared, surrounding them. Ryan exhaled slowly, outnumbered. Again. Sena's hands curled into fists. There was no way out. Vorgar let out a deep, guttural chuckle. "You are persistent, human. I'll give you that." Asterisk asterisk, he cracked his neck, eyes filled with bloodlust asterisk asterisk. "But now, it's over." Asterisk asterisk. Ryan didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly. "You sure about that?" Vorgar snarled. "There's nowhere left to run. Drop your weapon, and I'll make your death quick." Ryan smirked. "See, that's where we're different. I don't do quick deaths." Before the words even fully left his mouth, Ryan moved, faster than Sena had ever seen. His rifle came up in an instant. 1, 2, 3 shots. 3 Gurnek fell before they could even react. Vorgar roared in fury, charging with terrifying speed. His massive blade swung down, aiming to split Ryan in 2. Ryan dodged at the last second. The blade sliced through the air, missing him by inches. Sena barely had time to react as the battle exploded around her. Ryan was a blur of motion. A Gurnek lunged for him. He twisted, grabbing its arm, and with a brutal snap, dislocated it before delivering a crushing elbow strike to its throat. Another one fired a plasma shot. Ryan ducked, rolled, and returned fire, his shot hitting perfectly between its eyes. Sana watched in stunned awe. This human was winning. 1 against 6, and he was winning. But then, Vorgar was faster than expected. The Gurnek leader used the opening to slam into Ryan with full force, sending him crashing into a tree. Ryan grunted in pain, his rifle knocked from his hands. Sana's heart pounded. Vorgar loomed over Ryan, his blade raised for the final strike. You fought well, human, but you die now. Sana's breath caught. This was it. But Ryan smirked. No, you do. And then, he activated the explosive charge. The moment Vorgar had slammed him into the tree, Ryan had planted a small, nearly invisible device on his armor. A high-pitched beep filled the air. Vorgar's eyes widened. What? Boom! The explosion tore through the air, sending the massive Gurnek leader flying backward. His body hit the ground hard, smoke rising from his ruined armor. Silence. The remaining Gurnek stared in horror. Their leader was down. Ryan slowly stood up, breathing heavily, his face covered in dirt and blood. He stared them down. Then he raised his sidearm. Run. The Gurnek didn't hesitate. They fled into the jungle, disappearing into the night. The battle was over. Ryan exhaled, rolling his shoulder with a wince. Damn, that one hurt. Sana just stared at him. What kind of being was this? The truth about Ryan. Sana stood frozen, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The jungle around them had gone eerily silent, the shadows of the fleeing Gurnek disappearing into the darkness. Ryan Carter, the human who had just faced an overwhelming enemy and won, stood over the unconscious body of Vorgar. His face was calm, but his breathing was heavy. His armor was dented, his knuckles bruised, but he was still standing. Sana swallowed hard. How? She had never seen anyone fight like that. Ryan holstered his weapon and turned to her. You all right? Sana blinked, still processing everything. She nodded slowly. Yes, but you. How did you do that? Ryan sighed, running a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. Do what? Sana gestured at the battlefield. That, you just fought an entire Gurnek hunting pack, alone. You shouldn't have survived. Ryan smirked slightly, though his eyes carried a tired look. Yeah, Gurnek don't expect humans to fight back. Sana narrowed her eyes. They call your kind weak. Ryan's smirk faded. A lot of species do, right up until they realize the truth. Sana tilted her head, curiosity overpowering her fear. What truth? Ryan took a deep breath, looking at the night sky above. He seemed to debate something in his mind before finally answering. That humans don't stop fighting. Ever. Sana listened carefully as Ryan continued, his voice carrying the weight of experience. We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. We don't have claws or thick armor. But we survive. Because we refuse to die easy. He turned to look at her, his gaze piercing. You saw those Gurnek. They expected fear. They expected me to run. That's why they lost. Sana stared at him. She had never thought of humans like this before. Her people were known for their intelligence, their diplomacy, their ability to reason their way out of conflicts. But humans, they fought their way out. She looked at Ryan's worn armor, the scratches and dents telling the story of many battles before this one. He had been through this before, many times. Sana hesitated, then finally asked the question that had been forming in her mind. Who are you really? Ryan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Captain Ryan Carter. Terran Expeditionary Forces, Special Recon. Sana's eyes widened. She had heard of the Terran military before, but only in stories. Ryan continued, his voice quieter now. I was on a mission. Got stranded on this planet. Been surviving ever since. Sana frowned. How long? Ryan gave a humorless chuckle. Too long. Her chest tightened. He had been here alone all this time, fighting, surviving. No allies, no reinforcements, no help. And yet, he was still here. Sena lowered her gaze, feeling something strange. Guilt. Her people had always looked down on humans. They saw them as a reckless, primitive species. But now, standing beside this soldier, she realized how wrong they were. Ryan Carter was not weak. He was the most dangerous being she had ever met. The road ahead. Ryan crouched beside Vorgar's unconscious form. He pulled a small holo recorder from his belt and scanned the Gernak's armored insignia. Sena frowned. "What are you doing?" Ryan kept his eyes on the scanner. "Gernak don't hunt this far out for no reason. Something bigger is happening. I need to find out what." Sena hesitated, then asked the question forming in her mind. "What will you do with him?" Ryan looked at Vorgar's motionless body. "Leave him. He'll live." Sena was surprised. "You're not going to kill him." Ryan shook his head. Killing a leader in their own hunting grounds. That would bring more of them. He stood up and turned to her. "I need to get off this planet." Sena nodded. "I can help." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Because where I'm going, it's only gonna get worse." Sena met his gaze, her fear slowly fading. "You saved my life, human. And now, I want to see what you're really capable of." Ryan chuckled. "Fair enough." The two of them stood there for a moment, surrounded by the jungle, by the aftermath of battle. And then, without another word, they walked forward, toward whatever came next. A bigger danger and the final decision. Sena followed Ryan through the jungle, her mind racing. Everything she thought she knew about humans had been shattered in just one night. Ryan wasn't like anyone she had ever met. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he was the most dangerous. And now he was her only hope. The jungle thinned as they reached a rocky ridge overlooking the valley below. Ryan knelt down, using his binocular scanner to survey the area. Sena crouched beside him, peering into the distance, and what she saw made her blood freeze. A massive Gernak warship sat in the clearing, its metal hull covered in scars from battles fought across the galaxy. Around it, hundreds of Gernak warriors moved in tight formations, preparing for something big. Sena's voice was barely a whisper. "What are they doing?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "They're not just hunting. This is an invasion force." Sena's breath hitched. An invasion. Ryan scanned the ship's markings, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't just a hunting party. This is a forward base. They're staging an attack." Sena shook her head. "Attack on what?" Ryan looked at her. "Your homeworld." Silence. Sena's stomach twisted. If the Gernak were planning an assault, her people had no idea what was coming. And they weren't ready for this. Ryan stood up. "I need to stop them." Sena stared at him. "You mean, we need to stop them?" Ryan gave her a long look. "You sure about that?" Sena clenched her fists. "My people don't believe in war. We aren't soldiers. But if we don't fight now, we'll be nothing but prey." Ryan smirked. "Now you're thinking like a human." The final plan. Ryan wasted no time. He pulled up a holomap of the warship, scanning its weak points. "The ship has a fuel core underneath. If we can overload it, we can take the whole thing down before they launch." Sena swallowed. "That sounds incredibly dangerous." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, but it'll work." Sena took a deep breath. "What do you need me to do?" Ryan gave her a quick once-over, then handed her a small human-made explosive device. "You're small, fast. You can get inside the ventilation ducts and plant this near the core." Sena's grip tightened around the device. She had never fought before, never killed before. But she wasn't going to be prey anymore. She met Ryan's gaze. "Let's do this." The infiltration. Under the cover of darkness, they moved like ghosts toward the warship. The Gernak guards patrolled the perimeter, their heavy boots crunching against the dirt. Ryan took out the first two silently, his combat knife flashing in the moonlight. Sena swallowed her fear and climbed into the vents, slipping through the tight passageways toward the ship's core. Her heart hammered as she reached the reactor chamber, the pulsing energy casting a faint blue glow. She pulled out the explosive and set the timer. 30 seconds. Sena took a deep breath and whispered into her communicator. It's set. Ryan's voice came through instantly. Good. Now get out. Sena turned, but a Gurnak guard spotted her. Sena ran. The entire warship roared to life, alarms blaring as Gurnak warriors scrambled into action. Sena dove through the vent just as gunfire exploded behind her. She hit the ground hard, rolling as Ryan appeared beside her. Time's up. Move. They sprinted into the jungle, blaster fire raining down behind them. The Gurnak were furious, chasing them as the timer on the explosive counted down. 5, 4, 3. Ryan grabbed Sena's arm and pulled her behind cover. 2, 1. Boo-oom. The night sky erupted in fire as the warship's core detonated, sending shockwaves through the jungle. The force of the blast ripped through the clearing, sending Gurnak warriors flying. The ship tore apart, its massive frame collapsing in a fiery explosion. Sena shielded her eyes as debris rained down. When the dust finally settled, nothing remained of the warship except for a smoldering wreck. The invasion was over. The final decision. Ryan sat on a fallen log, catching his breath. Sena stood beside him, staring at the burning remains of the Gurnak warship. They had won. Ryan turned to her. So, what now? Sena exhaled slowly. I need to warn my people. The Gurnak won't stop. We need to be ready. Ryan nodded. You will be. Sena glanced at him. What about you? Ryan smirked. I still need to get off this planet. She hesitated, then made her decision. Then I'll help you. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You sure? It won't be easy. Sena grinned for the first time. I think I'm finally starting to understand humans. Ryan chuckled. Then let's get started. With the jungle behind them and a war on the horizon, they walked forward, together.